Well, okay, everybody, we're going to uh, learn some things about editing and how to create a clinic report. Now, this is NeuroGuide, but if people want to follow along what I'm doing, then you can go into the NeuroGuide demo. You do that by clicking Help, enter demo mode. So just make sure everybody does that, because it's everything that it's all the add-ons and all that stuff is available in the demo mode. So you can learn about it. You don't have to, and it's free. So I'm now in the demo mode. I'm going to go to File, Open, and these are all the various amplifiers you can import. But we have the demo mode. The only one that's available is this Lexicor file. So you can click that. You also have tutorial files. Now this is my, I'm a super user, but you'll have signal generators, and then you have EDF format as well as text files you can import. And so this is eyes closed, age 55. And this is an individual who is a Mensa, very high IQ guy, very talented. He had two businesses. He lived in Gainesville, Florida. And he was walking home in an evening to his home, from his business to his home, and he was assaulted with a bat in the right parietal region. And he was robbed. And he went home, and he started to get a headache, and his wife said, well, why don't you just lay down and go to sleep? Well, she found him on the floor in the morning, and he had a hematoma that luckily had stopped bleeding during the night. But it pocketed in the back of his head here, so they drained the blood. But now he's paralyzed on the left, and he has spatial neglect. He doesn't shave the left side of his face. I recorded an EEG from him when I worked at the Bay Pines VA, and had a white coat on, and lab coat, and I came into the left side, and he didn't see me. I waved like that. He's just looking, and then I had to walk over to in front of him. And he goes, "Oh, hi, Doc. How you doing?" Because I said, "Did you realize that you didn't see me as I was waving at you?" And he says, "Oh yeah." I says, "It's a problem I got. It was a big problem when I tried to get my driver's license too." And I said, "Driver's license?" He says, "Yeah, those cars are going like this." I said, "Okay." He's just joking, but in the case, so we're in the demo mode, and the first thing we want to do, it's a default, which Lexicor happens to have these auxiliary channels to measure EKG and other things. So what we want to do is go down to linked ears. These are all these different amplifiers. Double click linked ears, and this is his EEG. And the first thing we do is scan the EEG. And you can do it by page up, page down, and you can see here, I'm going to resize this so everybody can see it better. And you can see at 19 seconds, this is an eye movement. So you want to go through the record. That could be artifact. The problem is it's P4 is the maximum, but you have this dip here. So just make a note of any artifact as you go through the record, from beginning to end. Visually examine it. Okay. So you'll know where the artifact is. And there's not much in this record. There's one right there. Artifact. So know where the artifact is, artifact there too. You can click home and do it again, or click end. And often what I do is I start at the end of the record, so I know how much data I've got, and then I march backwards to evaluate the existence of artifact. And it's always a good idea to do that. It doesn't take long. Go home. And then after that, you want to select, well, there's, now we're going to do artifacting. There's a number of ways to do it. I'm going to go to edit, automatic editing. And we can, the default is this automatic editing method using Z-score. Essentially what is done here, we have instantaneous Z-scores using the Hilbert transform. So you don't have to use a Fourier transform, which is, that looks at a spectrum over a period of time. So this is every instant of time we can calculate the power spectrum at different frequencies, the center of these frequencies. And so I set the threshold here at 2 standard deviations. That's really about 3 standard deviations because we're looking at instantaneous moments, but don't worry about it. You can always change it. So I'm going to start at the beginning, and I'm going to have 2 minutes of data. And then I'm going to click Generate Edits. I'm going to close that. And up here, you can see I got 1 minute and 59 seconds of data. The split half reliability on the average is 0.99, and retest reliability is 0.95. So you always want to look at the reliabilities here. Especially the retest reliability. What that is where NeuroGuide will take half of the selected artifact-free parts and use that half to predict the second half. And you can see here is 0.95 accurate in predicting. So that's split half reliability. You can see where it is black down here, that means it did not select the data. It considered it a possible artifact. But notice it failed to get our pathology. Okay? It's a conservative method, too conservative. So I'm going to page down and go through and make sure that at 19 seconds, it didn't pick up any. Let me go back. You can see, remember that artifact we saw? It's blacked out. It's not picked up. So you want to go through and make sure that there is no artifact in your selection. The problem with this method is it's super conservative, and so it omits some of the pathology. So I'm going to click Home. And now I'm going to compare it to a normative database by clicking View, Dynamic FFT, Absolute Power. In the top here is the actual microvolts squared. You could look at amplitude if you want, relative power and absolute power. It's the amplitude spectrum. This is the power spectrum. Now, you don't want to use relative power. And it's best to use the absolute power spectrum because that is what is the standard in the field. Relative power is where you take the data you've selected and you add up all the numbers, all the values, and then you divide that into each frequency range. So if you have, the problem with that is if you have elevated theta, you will then have diminished beta because it's a percentage of the total. For elevated beta, you'll have diminished theta. So you don't want to use relative power. In the history of quantitative EEG, before we had good ability to artifact like this, you had to use relative power. And in the 70s and early 80s, the problem was all these amplifiers are all different. And so you had to take a percentage of the total. And that became the standard for a while. But then myself, Roy John, we used absolute power, compared absolute power to relative power. We published all kinds of stuff on that. And so today we can use absolute power with no problem. So be sure and use absolute power. And here you can see the microvolts squared, its maximum P4, and minimum at the blue is the T3, 1.5 microvolts squared, 11 microvolts squared for P4, where the pathology is. Here are the Z-scores. And you can see that C4, P4, and T4 are deviant from normal, which is consistent with the patient's history. He was struck in the right parietal region. He's paralyzed on the left. He has spatial neglect, doesn't shave the left side of his face. That's consistent with where he's deviant from normal. So what we want to do now is go to edit, and we're going to save our edit file. And let's say March 1. Oops. Now, one experience I had with Mark Miller, I'll tell in a minute. So I've saved that. Now what I'm going to do is add what was missing. This is still good data. I want to make sure that I get the pathology. It's not artifact. And if you keep looking at, see, this is actually not artifact. If you want to look for F7, F8, when people move their eyes left or right, then it's 180-degree difference. Okay, and a typical method is when you have your EEG cap on, the EEG is streaming across the screen. Before you record it, you say to your patient, please, now I want you to open your eyes and close your eyes. I want you to move your eyes left and right. Move your eyes up and down for at least 10 seconds each. So you know what it looks like. I want you to grit your teeth. Then you'll see the temporal EMG. I want you to frown your forehead. And you'll see the FP1, FP2, what it looks like. And then the occipital, the muscles back here, it's more difficult to get it. But if you have them move their head back, so they got some strain on their neck muscles, then you can see muscle artifact in O1 and O2. So now and everybody's a little different. So now in 1 minute or 30 seconds, you got a view of what the artifact is. So while you're recording, if any of that artifact is created, you'll see it immediately, and you'll say to your patient, no, don't blink your eyes. No, don't grit your teeth. Relax your mouth, because you can recognize it. Okay, so that's just part of the method of doing that. So I'm just going to pick up some data and show that this is such a robust method. You don't want to select any artifact, but artifact doesn't come from P3 and P4 or C3, C4, etc. Now we got 2 minutes and 10 seconds. And again, it's the same areas are deviant from normal. We can go to the end of the record.
Do you tend to go through different montages like aplasia?
Yeah, for artifacting, it's better. I do, yes. I'll do that in a minute. It's best to start with just linked errors. So I'm just want to show that it doesn't make any difference. It's the same significant deviation, but you can do that yourself. And then you go to edit, save edit file, and we'll say March. Usually I'd say edit 1, edit 2, but I'll just, because I got so many in this folder, I didn't want to do it. So it's our second one. And then you can clear all selections. And rejections. And then select a different segment. You can also use a different artifacting method. Instead of using the automatic, the Z-score method, you can use a template method. That's here on the left side. So you got to deselect the Z-score method. And we have pattern recognition routines that we develop that can detect drowsiness, detect eye movement, and muscle EMG. So we don't select it. but you still need to go through it, make sure it doesn't get in there. And so here's an amplitude match. Now I need to select 10 seconds of EEG, and then it will be matched 1-to-1 by this amplitude multiplier, peak to peak amplitude. And it'll take that 10 seconds and it'll move it as the threshold for what's acceptable through the whole record, and then we'll detect artifact. So I'm going to just move this over here so I can maintain it. I'm going to go ahead and select EEG. You can see how noisy, that's just 2 seconds. Spectrum is really noisy at 2 seconds. There's 7 seconds. So you don't want to select artifact. I got 9 seconds. Okay, now we got 11. But you can already see the pathology is there. Just with 11 seconds. Now that's our template. Now I'm going to go to the panel over here. I'm going to say generate edits. Now it's got 2 minutes and 4 seconds. I'm going to close. And here's our pathology, just like it was before, the right temporal, parietal, and central. So you can use the template method too. And you can do it with different templates. I picked mine, or you can add, subtract. I just put it at two minutes. And then finally, and you can then save this again, just to make sure that you get the same, you get 0.97 test reliability. You can clear the edits, and then you can do the old-fashioned way that has how the normative database is created, eyeball. Just actually select data, 2 minutes of data by hand, and don't use the automatic method. And make sure you get the same clinical conclusions, no matter what artifacting method you use. And I got 31 seconds there. See, it doesn't take long to do it by hand, because this happens to be a good record. But here we see the same parts of the brain are deviant from normal. So you can do that multiple times. Now, in an interesting case in a court of law, one time near Cape Canaveral, Florida, the attorney retained me to go through to help a client. Is this guy who was in prison, and he's facing a possible death sentence. He killed his drug. They were got in a dispute about selling drugs or doing something with drugs, and he ended up killing his partner. And so the question was, is he mentally fit to? Is there a reason not to give him the death penalty? Essentially, what it was. And so Mark Neuer, the nemesis, he was on the side of the prosecutor to fry this guy. They didn't want. And this guy had been in a coma. He had a few years before struck by some object in the right frontal region, and especially it was around F4 region, where he had slow waves. He had theta and delta slow waves. And so Mark Neuer tells the judge, he says, Your Honor, quantitative EEG is completely useless. It's people like Dr. Thatcher who intentionally selects artifact to make people look like they're abnormal. And that's just, the whole field is filled up with these disreputable people. And he really went off on me personally and anybody doing quantitative EEG. The judge says, Dr. Thatcher, says, well, what do you say about that? And I said, well, Your Honor, it's not true. Let me show you. And I got the guy's EEG, and I did what I just did here. And I got 3 independent edits. Each of them show a focal frontal lobe. None of them had any artifact. And then I said, Your Honor, I'll select the whole record because this guy doesn't have any artifact. And I get exactly the same result. And I did that. I'll do that within like 1 minute, 1.5 minutes. And Newer goes, wow, where did you get that software? Just okay, let's move on. So real. Anyway, you can do that yourself if you want to. So I'm going to clear the screen. And I'm going to use the automatic artifacting method over here. Most of the time you'll use this method, but there are 3 different methods if you want to. So we're back where we were. We save that record. And once we do that, now what we want to do is look at the Laplacian. Because the problem is that you'll have a lot of patients on medication, okay? The medication is delivered through the bloodstream, through the anterior, posterior, and middle cerebral arteries, and it bathes the whole brain. And for the most part, the neurotransmitters are co-registered. There's a whole bunch of studies now showing with staining that dopamine and serotonin and epinephrine, etc., are all, those neurons are all together. You know, there's a slight difference now with the motor cortex because there's greater concentration of dopamine, but there's also serotonin. There's never just one neurotransmitter. They're all mixed together. So what you need to do, the neurotransmitters, the medication is just bathing the entire brain. So you want to use the Laplacian to get rid of that. Now, what the Laplacian does is it's used by NASA all the time to look at planets, let's say, where there's hills and valleys and there's plains. So the Laplacian will, anything is general, it sets to 0. Anything that's specific, like a mountain range, it exaggerates. So as a consequence, the medications are bathing the entire brain, okay, all over. And so the Laplacian will set that to 0. If there's a focal deviation from normal in the right parietal lobe, it'll make it really big so you can see it. And the way that the Laplacian works, now, first of all, the linked ears is being referenced to the ears, where the electrical potential is with respect to the ears, because there's no neurons in most people's ears. But what the Laplacian does is it's reference independent. It's looking at the currents, let's say, around the P4 electrode. And so the reference is the area around the P4 electrode, or the C3 electrode, or the F4 electrode. Each electrode is looking at the rate of change. It's the second spatial derivative in you had calculus. And as Simone de Laplace figured that out in the 1800s. And what it does is you got the electrical field, which is in volts, and you take the Laplacian, now you got current at right angles to the electrical field, which means right angle coming right through our skull at right angles. That's what the Laplacian does. So you got a large electric field that's like a sheet. Imagine you got a bed sheet on your bed and it's got ruffles. If you could do a Laplacian on your sheet, what you do is every part of the sheet that is flat will get real flat, and every ruffle will get real high. That's what it does. It's the second spatial derivative of the rate of change. So the first derivative is the rate of change. The second derivative is the rate of change of the rate of change. And so it's looking how steep it is. And in the history of physics, that's what Galileo and Newton figured out. By using the second derivative, Newton's famous equation is force equals mass times acceleration. Acceleration is the second derivative. So if you're driving your car and it's at 40 miles an hour, that's the first derivative, miles per hour. You then step on the accelerator, but there's no force on you. Okay, you're just fine. You step on the accelerator, and then suddenly you'll go back because that's the second derivative. If you're driving smooth, 40 miles an hour, put on the brake, you'll go forward because that's the second derivative. And that Newton and Galileo are the ones that figured that what's important is the second derivative, not the first derivative. The rate of change is the rate of change.
Recently, I've been reading Da Vinci was onto that many, many hundreds of years, earlier. He never figured out how to systematize it, but he suspected that.
Yeah, and Archimedes too, the Greeks. Archimedes actually figured out the integral calculus, but he used those concepts of the second derivative for build cannons and the way the trajectory will go with the missiles and all that stuff. And the Greeks and the Romans, I guess it was the Greeks, hired him. Anyway, here you can see the Laplacian, which is the current at right angles. And it's good to see it, but you see it's clearly focal to the right hemisphere and at the same frequency. But the important thing about the Laplacian is it's used to detect epilepsy. And it's always a good idea to do the Laplacian and then go through the record and see if there's any spikes in epileptic discharges. Because that's what it does. It gets rid of the medication effects. It exaggerates things that are local, anything that's specific to a particular region. It makes it really obvious. And you can see here, for example, O2 is really dysregulated. Look at P4. Compare P3 to P4. So, and then you want to look at the report. Let me first go back to Linked-Ears, but it's got the same edits for both of them. And let's take a look at the maps. So you go to report, generate analysis. See how fast that is? This shows you all the test-retest reliability measures, split half and otherwise. And here you see absolute power deviant from normal in the regions where he was injured. Now, he also has a counter-coup injury with the left frontal. And the higher frequencies don't really show the effect, but look at relative power just misses it. It does it here because it's such a big effect, but it's showing reduced energy, which is an artifact. That's really not, there is nothing that's reduced there. Now you get the 1 Hertz bands. And I'll show you how you do this. And it goes up to 30 Hertz. And you can see how focal it gets. There's amplitude asymmetry. So I missed. Oh, the problem is I'm still in the Laplacian. So let me, I thought I got Linked-Ears. Okay, there it is. See, the Linked-Ears is not as, give as much information as the Laplacian, but here you can see coherence in the right parietal region. This is where he was injured. It's blue because it's reduced connectivity because he's lost a lot of tissue there. The red is probably compensatory. So often you'll see this, and the more severe, clinically important metric is hypocoherence. It's low. And often you'll see hypercoherence, which is compensatory. Now, the problem with hypercoherence is that's an inefficient brain. You really want coherence not to be significantly deviant. And but it tells you, as doing neurofeedback, target the weak system. That's what Luria emphasized. You have to identify the weak system. We identify the weak system initially just by evaluating the patient's symptoms. So everything starts with the patient's symptoms. You don't use the EEG to diagnose. You use the EEG to evaluate the symptoms and the clinical history. So you do the symptoms, clinical history, make sure you understand that they're weak on the left side, they in an automobile accident or TBI, they're unconscious or whatever it is, know what their symptoms are. And then do the QEEG to drill down more precisely as to why their symptoms are what they are. So you want to link symptoms. And it's very important to do that way.
Now, on this one, it shows, you know, a hypercoherence in delta.
And theta, yeah.
No, I mean, over in delta.
Oh, hyper, yeah, high coherence.
And so how would you explain that within this map?
Again, compensatory dynamics. It's recruiting a whole bunch of neurons to do, has diminished capacity and resource because of the injury, and so it uses all the available neurons that it's got. And so it becomes hyper-coherent.
Which is inefficient.
Yeah. So you see it in more detail here. But it allows you to target what you got to target. Now, so failed to add the discriminant function, but if we go here to report selections, you can select all these different things. I didn't select relative power, and I only selected z-scores. I didn't do raw scores, but you can if you wish. It really complicates your report. All you want here is z-scores. But you also can look at the traumatic injury discriminant function, and you can also look at phase shift and phase lock. You can look at cross-spectral power. You can see how much is in-phase connectivity and how much is out-of-phase connectivity. I won't go into the details of that. That's discussed in the handbook a lot. So you have these, and here's the phase slope index. This is a connectivity suite. This is an add-on, so it costs extra to get this. But this gives you much more power to do things. And when you select it, you got the power ratios if you want, and you can look at peak frequency. But then what you want to do is save this particular template. Click save, and then save it, go to the folder that you save things in. And so I'm going to click OK, and then I'm going to do report. And now we're going to get the discriminant function. And you see that it's 99.5% likely that there was a traumatic brain injury. And this came from the University of Maryland, shock trauma, where the neurosurgeons, Fred Geisler was a neurosurgeon who had a PhD in physics before he went to medical school. Really good person. And he really liked the EEG. And so he helped organize over 600 subjects, I think, TBI patients at shock trauma. They're mild patients, mild mostly. And so it took time to do this, but him and myself and Dr. Saltman, he was the chairman of neurosurgery, published this paper. And you can see the parts of the brain that are affected most, which is the orbital frontal region. We selected these parts of the brain. We did a hypothesis test before we ran the analyses. So it's in science, it's a good idea if you can. If you're focused on some particular subject, form an hypothesis before you do your analyses. Okay. And our hypothesis was that the most vulnerable parts of the brain are the frontal lobes, orbital frontal, temporal lobes, and then the diffuse axonal injuries by rapid acceleration, deceleration injury of the white matter. So we wanted to look at coherence and phase. And so that's what we did. We selected those variables and put them into the discriminant function. Because we knew in the scientific literature, those are the parts of the brain that are vulnerable, most vulnerable in traumatic brain injury, with rapid acceleration and then rotational forces, and then, the sudden stopping or acceleration of the skull, and the brain is floating around inside the skull, and it bangs against the bone. We also looked at a traumatic brain injury severity index that that came from, after I had left shock trauma, University of Maryland, I worked at the National Institutes of Health, as I mentioned. Then I went from the National Institutes of Health to the Bay Pines VA Medical Center. And there we had a multi-million-dollar grant. That's where we had those 4 VA hospitals and 3 military bases and had all this data. And so we developed a different method, used independently, and we replicated the discriminant function of it from the University of Maryland. But we also developed a severity index. And that's what this is. And that was published. So again, you can save all this in the patient's folder. And you can see these are bitmap graphics files. And it's a good idea to, when you do this, you go to the patient's folder and create a subfolder. Don't just have all these maps strewn all of your patient's folder. Create another folder. For example, I call it brain map linked ears, BMLE. And that's what I did here, for example. These are the brain maps. I don't have to save them, but that's a way you would, otherwise, if you don't do that, you'll have them spread out everywhere. And similarly, we've already seen this, but I'll just do it really quick. You also want to do the Laplacian. You get the discriminant function doesn't work with the Laplacian, but you get more information using the Laplacian than you do just linked ears. And you can't calculate coherence if you do the Laplacian because of the way that it's looking at these currents. It separates each of the sources, so the connectivity doesn't make any sense. And so that's how you can quickly get the.
Now, with the TBI severity index, it showed it between kind of mild and moderate on this guy, and I would consider him a lot more moderate. This severe, especially if you lose the aspects in the left hemisphere or the left visual and spatial integration.
Yeah. So it's moderate and it's not severe. But again, it's not used for diagnosis.
Okay.
You have that to just look at. It helps you identify which parts of the brain to target for your neurofeedback. For example, here you see FP1, FP2, and O1 and O2 for these. So it's really to help inform you as to which protocol to use. But you don't have to do any of the stuff I just did. Instead, let's do the automatic clinic report. This is really important. Your time is important. And so all you do is go to report, automatic clinic report.
And while that's generating, have you had to defend the TBI
In court?
In court, that one you just talked about?
Yeah, I have. And I explained that, first of all, you don't really need the discriminant function because you can do what I'm going to do here. You use Loretta. But the purpose of the discriminant function at shock trauma, here's SW Loretta, was to look at how the brain changes after these people are admitted. So you want to see them moving in the direction of good health. That gives feedback to the neurosurgeons and to the medical staff rather than getting worse. So the purpose of it was not to diagnose it, but it was to evaluate how they changed when they gave them treatment. And I just explained that to the court. I don't have to, usually if you go to court for a TBI situation, the traumatic brain injury has already been diagnosed. So, yeah, there's no doubt about it. The question is, given the fact that there was a traumatic brain injury, what are the consequences of that? What impact does that have on his health, on his ability to function? How much money should I sue this guy for? Because it's the injury post TBI why you're in court. And see if I can. Oh, I've got to move it down so you can see it. So here you can put in your Rocky Mountain Neuroscience, whatever. You can add your particular place. That'll come out on the report. You can put in the address. You can have your logo, which you can put into your report. You can have a signature that you put in the report. And all this information can be there. Your email, the name, your clinician name, all of that. Etc. And so you save the company information. You go next. And we're going to include the TBI discriminant, and we're going to select all of these biofeedback capabilities. You're going to certify that the data is artifact-free, and you click Generate Report. And this is how fast a QEEG report can be created as you watch it happen in front of you. So it takes about a minute.
And is this one of the extra functions you had mentioned? Like the purchase add-ons?
Yeah, this is well, these are clinic reports. If you get 10, it's $35. If you get 100, it's $1,500. So it's about $30 a piece. But you charge the patient. So anyway, you can see, here's the clinic report. This is a Word document. You can save it as a Word document. And you can go through it. Again, you can set this up any way you want. And you want whatever medications that should have been, it's actually that first, the first thing that came up, that panel, you can put in the medications, you can put in a clinical history. And now it summarizes. This is the QEEG analysis for deviant from normal and showed dysregulation bilateral frontal lobe, especially right frontal, bilateral temporal lobe, especially right temporal, etc. The parietal lobes are involved in visual spatial information processing, short-term memory, executive attention, receptive language on the left. Now, these words come straight out of the neuropsychology textbook. Okay? So if you go in the neuropsychology textbook, and it's also, I have it in this handbook too. It goes through injury to the right parietal lobes and beta involving prosody problems and weakness on the left side and all that stuff. That's in the neuropsychology textbook. So that's what these words are. They're not mine. They actually come from the textbook.
Can I give a user hint for those people who are exploring this? If you have an external monitor, which many of us do, you want to make sure that your resolution is set to 100%. Otherwise, the report writer and Word will go off the page.
Yeah, and in the demo mode, there's no fee for the demo mode. So run the demo mode and set your monitor resolution like it should be before you waste any money. So there's the words that describing what's going on. These are neurofeedback recommendations, and it shows you the frequency and the location where you would probably, and we can do neurofeedback on all 19 channels simultaneously. And you can do neurofeedback in over 1,000 different metrics in using SW Loretta. And no problem with that because we use Z-score neurofeedback, and we'll be going into that in the afternoon after lunch. So what's good about Z-score neurofeedback, so here's the memory network. This guy has problems, pain network. And you try to focus on the symptoms that are most severe. And so these are radar maps showing the deviation from normal. The green is the right hemisphere, the red is the left hemisphere. So he was struck in the right hemisphere. Now, the importance of all of this is that it's completely descriptive and it helps guide you as to which protocol to use when you do neurofeedback. Because you want to target the regions of the brain that are linked to symptoms. He has a lot of problems, with anxiety, attention, executive function, pain. Here's his QEEG. Here's the actual screen capture of your EEG put in your report. So both the Laplacian and linked ears. And now we go into the electrical neuroimaging part, which is the Brodmann areas. And now these are the Brodmann areas that are deviant from normal, the frontal Brodmann areas, the temporal Brodmann areas. You can see Brodmann area 4 and 25 are most deviant from normal. Here's the parietal region. All these Brodmann areas are deviant from normal. And now you got the neuronavigator, that's at 1 hertz, 2 hertz, 4 hertz, 5. Now you got the absolute power and what I showed you previously. Here's the right parietal region that has hypocoherence. There's the phase differences. And there's the TBI discriminant function. And now in here is a whole bunch of explanations, citing literature, what tests we test reliability, and all these things. It'll help if in a court of law to get this admitted, and we've never had any trouble with this. And now you got a citation to the scientific literature here. So, like, I think I was mentioning it, I was in a court case where a neurologist said that quantitative EEG is just a bunch of nonsense. Nobody uses it. It has no science behind it. It's in disrepute. This is disreputable. He went on and on. And so as he was saying these bad things about QEEG, I wrote down some questions for the attorney. And so the attorney asked him after he finished his tirade, he says, "Doctor, have you ever recorded the EEG yourself?" And he says, "No, technicians record the EEG." "Oh, okay. Have you ever did any quantitative EEG yourself?" He says, "Oh, no, nobody does that." So, "Well, have you ever read the scientific literature? Do you know that there's over 150,000 peer-reviewed journal articles on quantitative EEG?" And he says, "No." "Have you ever read any books on quantitative EEG?" He says, "No." He says, "You know that there's hundreds of books on quantitative EEG?" He says, "No." He says, "Your Honor, I move for this man to be dismissed." Granted. So that's what you do. Neurologists know nothing about many of them, nothing about quantitative EEG. They've never used it. The guy says, no, the technician records the EEG. So they don't have any firsthand knowledge with EEG. They send their patients out to a special place to get EEG done, and then they just get a visual report. Well, there's a lot of squiggles over here. Anyway, so now you save this in the patient's folder, and you're done. I mean, that's how fast it is.
Is that all done via algorithms?
I'm sorry, what?
Is that all created via algorithms?
It's a creative algorithms. It's it's just C programming in C.
But what gets into the report is largely what is atypical, aberrant, or Z-scores outside of the range of +2, -2.
Yeah, you can set that range. Yeah, if you, I could have set it to 5 or 6, and there'd be no significant differences.
And let's say you run the report and you want to get, there's a program just doesn't pick the screenshot of NeuroNavigator that you like. Is there any way that?
Yeah, you just do your own.
To print some things outside of just a screenshot?
Not in the report because it's limited. What it does is I think we can have 6 I don't know if you remember, man, how many screen captures of, and it takes the most significant Lorettas. But you can always, if you have SW Loretta, just take your own and paste it in. So
Yeah.
it's just a Word document.
No, I don't even want to say capture all the ones that are of significance level.
No, I think it's limited. Sometimes it'll be 100 of them.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, it's, I'd have to, it's been a while since, I designed the program. I designed it.
Well, it's only one per frequency. I won't put, so the most you're gonna see is 30, but I've never seen a report with anything close to that.
I think it's limited. Because this guy, he has no significance above 6 hertz. And so he stopped at 6, but we'll just take a look at it. So it's building up the,
Do you have any tips for, I'm getting a lot of low voltage EEGs lately, especially post-COVID. Do you have any tips for kind of getting into that as far as?
well, the thing is connectivity is independent of amplitude. That's one thing.
Right.
So coherence, the most important clinical thing is connectivity in any case. So if it's low, what you're really looking for are things that are focal. And so that's the most important thing. I guess this thing didn't work. It crashed. So one of the things that since we have, am I going to demo mode? Added SW Loretta. SW Loretta has, like I mentioned, 12,400 voxels. It's very very powerful, but it consumes the computer resources, really challenges it. And so if you run it too often, it will crash. And the way that we're still working on trying to figure out how to improve it, but you need to get a more powerful computer than I've got. This is an i5. Anyway, so here's where you put in all your comments, whole history and everything. It's very important. This will go into the clinic report, everything you put in here. The gender, handiness, who's the name of the technician, name of the clinician, any medications, all of that will be in your report. It's important to have that in your report.
I don't see where the history is located.
What's that?
Where the history is located?
Yeah, it's here under comments.
Oh.
Data test. Yeah. Anyway, I turned it off. And so if you don't know the age, but you know the date of birth, and you know the date of the test, then NeuroGuide would automatically create the age for you. But if you know the age, just type in the age. And so all this information now will be in the test or in your report. And go to link gears. Include that. Hopefully it won't crash. So that's, this is a very useful add-on because it immediately gets you into SW Loretta. And you're able to link the symptoms to dysregulation in the patient's brain. That's what you want to do. And this does it for you. And at the same time, it uses the language from neuropsych textbooks as a template for you. And you can always modify, add, do whatever you want to that report. And so you can see how fast this is to generate a report for you. Compared to spending, I used to spend like half an hour, 40 minutes writing reports. And you're welcome, all of you, to go in the demo mode and play with this so you can learn if you want. Do it on your leisure. So I added more information, not a lot, a little bit more. So the name, and date, handedness, medication, and whatever the history is, it's all in there now. Got 1, 2, there's 4 hertz, 3, 4, 5. And if we look at the EEG, so this shows 6 hertz. You see there's still something significant even at 8 hertz. So it stopped at 6, but there's nothing significant at these higher frequencies. So it's,
But the connectome and the DTI show whether it's harmonics or compensatory frequency, they don't normalize typically until they're far from the frequency of the injury. Or they're far from the frequency of the most dysregulation.
in this patient,
No, in neuronavigation.
well, it depends. If you're normal, there's no deviation from normal. We have 700.
I'm just looking at the demo patient, and at 11 hertz, the right hemisphere is very, very blue in the DTI. And the cerebellum is very, very blue.
Oh, diffusion tensor image.
Yeah, and the connector.
So what?
For this patient, the demo patient, where the no current sources are deviant, there's still connectivity.
Where the current sources are deviant?
No, at 11 hertz.
Did you use the neuronavigator?
Yes, I'm using it there now.
So-
And at 11 hertz, if you're viewing,
So let's just let everybody see what you're talking about. So I'm launching the neuronavigator.
okay,
Well, remember this, the neuronavigator is working on the Laplacian inside. And we're looking at linked areas at the surface here. That report is, but and then the neuronavigator did show a lot of significant difference. It's just that there's a limit in the number of images that can go in the report.
correct. However, all I was trying to say is that current sources, you said before connectivity was the most important.
Yeah.
Current sources can show us within normal limits, and connectivity can still be atypical.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, so at 11 hertz for the demo subject, it's hypocoherent all over at 11
Oh,
hertz.
crash.
Crash.
Yeah, it's hypocoherent.
It's hypocoherent.
Yeah. Let me take a look at it too.
Mine keeps on crashing.
Yeah,
What I would do is load it up and save the NSE file. Then you can just load it as much as you want.
save the what file?
NSE. The mirror, the,
Just save it as NG, just the nerve.
no, NSE, that's the.
Where is that?
Navigator file. It's on the, once you pop up Neural Navigator.
Okay, you gotta go to Neural Navigator.
Yeah, once you've computed it.
Yeah. Well, we'll follow what Ian is saying.
Under a navigator, very different.
You may, when you get a chance,
Yeah.
see what her,
Yeah.
she sees something different.
I'm not gonna- So to get into your navigator, you have this.
Z-scores. Oh, you have an older version. You're using your older version,
Oh.
which is fine.
Becomes a very different.
Yeah, we have that thumb drive, this thumb drive has the newest version.
Oh. What you do is you go to. Oh, very old. You have a very old version.
Yeah.
of that. That's.
It's
fine.
I
prehistoric.
saw the purpose, but no.
No, that's an old version. Now, let me see.
But this is the help, the demo one, right? So I would-
No, it's not demo. Hold on. Let's see. Three point oh point 2.1. You're using the version that you have on here.
Generally, what you do is limit, go to networks.
Old version.
We know that
Once you install zero guide on that.
And then so that's why I just fold it.
Yes.
And then let me mention, this happens to be a default screen. You don't want to look at that because it's everything. He has an attention problem. So that's one. And he also has a balance problem. So you go to this network list, networks over here, and you double click attention. And now you got make more sense. And we can,
You should save it as an NSC.
NSE, so you do file. No, once you load, where's your Neural Navigator?
and you see that this connectivity is deviant all the time.
Drop it down and add it.
To save the data, you just click on File.
Up here,
Yeah.
Ford Mustang.
save the NSE.
Yes. And then you can just keep loading it and it won't crash.
Yeah. Right. And you see.
Double click, oh, right click.
So what I'm doing now is just saving this under workshops. Normally you would save this in the patient's folder. In fact, I am going to save it in the in data.
Quite a bit of hypo.
So it's saving this data, hopefully.
Yeah, I got stuck at 33%. I don't know if that's.
Yeah, I'm stuck at 30. Hey,
It went through.
it did?
Yeah.
And then that was-
Yeah, so I'm having troubles with it, but for some reason, my computer is limited today. But in any case, this allows you to use the Neuron Navigator and to go through all the networks and different symptoms. I'm gonna probably,
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Now, how do I open that back up?
There's,
so there it is.
Neuron Navigator.
So you have networks here to look at. Here's symptoms to evaluate.
Oh.
And, but you want to select the networks and symptoms that the patient is troubled by. Because you want to focus on that to help that patient. You can also look at the cerebellum. Here, under symptoms, if you want to look at Parkinsonism, for example. And then it's a good idea here under connectivity to look at the connectivity and to either remove the cortex or make it. And under data type, let's see if I can, oh, there is no significant problem with this individual when it comes to Parkinsonism. Let me see if I go to 1 Hertz. So there we're beginning to see it, and it click the center voxel. And I'm going to go to so he has hypoconnectivity to his cerebellum. And you can
Can you step through that again
to
to
do
find
it?
like the hypo connectivity?
yeah. What I did is I went to connectivity and I selected function connectivity, and the threshold is 1.65 or less is normal, and up to 3 standard deviations. And then I went to data type, and you have options: lag coherence, coherence, phase differences, the phase slope indexes, information flow, phase log, and phase shift. These take a long time to calculate. We're working on a way to improve that, so I don't want to waste our time. And then I also go to the center voxel and I select it. And it's hard to see this because of the skull. Let me make sure I did that.
You just click show label for someone else?
Yeah, just click them.
No, you just click the big button.
The big, right here, you can see it. I'll get rid of the cortex. And now I'll click it. It's gone. Now they're there.
And the labels will then be like little flags off them, but they are hard to read when you're looking at a lot there.
Yeah, part of it is because I have the connectome. The connectome is the same as the 3-dimensional one, but it's in 2 dimensions. At the National Institutes of Health, $2 billion went into creating this one on the left. Another $2 billion, some of that $2 billion went into creating the connectome, making it 2-dimensional.
What data type are you looking at? Coherence or lag?
It's coherence.
Okay.
And so here's just the connectivity. And this is the demo, so anybody can do this. If you right mouse click and click the shift key and right mouse click, that's subthalamus left, subthalamus right. Brabant area 2 on the right, Brabant area 4 on the left, red nucleus on the right. So you can look at these different regions and find out what's going on. There's cerebellovermis, 7 and 8. So depress your shift key and then right mouse click. And to get rid of that, you just move your mouse, looking at Brabant area right, and I want to get rid of that label. Move your mouse to where there's not on the brain, depress your shift key, and then do right mouse click. So, and then we also can look at raw scores. From the cerebellum, that's the currents that are being generated independent of z-scores, and here are z-scores comparing it to a normative database. So anybody got any questions? Because we're going to probably go to lunch soon. Please, our audience. Hey, email. Let's see. Yeah, it is. Okay.